Welcome everyone to our NACDA pre-convention webinar series on NIL. And in this episode, we are going to be talking about student athlete education and in particular, some interesting things happening on campuses in terms of student athlete education. My name is Kristi Dosh. I will be your host today. I am the founder of Business of College Sports and the Business of College Sports podcast, and also have been involved in the planning of our NIL track at convention this year. So for those of you who are going to be in Orlando with us, please register for our NIL track. It does require a separate registration from your convention registration. So make sure you get registered for the NIL track. We have 6 really fantastic panels that are going to be on site in Orlando that I'm excited about. But there was so much content, we couldn't fit it all in Orlando, so we needed to do some pre-convention webinars here. And I'm excited to have Lynne, George, and Steve Simmons joining me today to talk more about student athlete education. I will start with Lynne. Lynne is the director of the Idea Bank at Troy University, which I had the pleasure of being able to visit this semester and see and hear about in person. So I will come back to her in just a minute to talk a little bit more about the Idea Bank. And Steve is the co-founder and chief operating officer of NIL Enterprise Solutions. Steve is and his organization are the sponsors of this webinar. So thank you, Steve. We are so thankful for your support of this NIL education for the college athletic administrators who are part of our organization. And I'm so glad to have you both. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, Lynne, I'm going to start with you because I got to come and actually be inside the Idea Bank at Troy University. Can you give people like a 5,000-foot view? What is the Idea Bank?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for visiting, by the way. It was great to have you here. The Idea Bank is the Troy University Student Entrepreneurship Center. In a nutshell, we exist to help students who want to start businesses. So we're part of the School of Business, but we serve all students of all majors, all disciplines, and we really just try to be a one-stop shop for anyone interested in entrepreneurship or starting a business. So we're off campus, and we really try to make it a little less academic, I guess, if that makes sense, and more practical and more action item start, how to start your business.
Perfect. And Steve, I know you all are working with universities and athletic departments and collectives and all sorts of folks in the NIL space to provide more education for student athletes. Why don't you give us your 5,000-foot view of what your organization does and what your goals are in terms of student athlete education?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Kristi. Simply put, we've seen more than enough professional athletes go bankrupt, homeless, prison, you name it. And when we look now into the NIL space, 2 years in, and the amount of money that's coming into the space, what do we expect is going to happen to these kids if they're not educated and properly prepared? So we decided, after working with several universities and their athletic departments and then a ton of professional athletes, to try to figure out what was missing, what would have helped them in the opportunities, to prevent opportunities that would have caused problems for them, and to really find best practices. And the important thing was doing it in a really representational way so that it looks like all the athletes, right? So, traditionally female and BIPOC athletes are disadvantaged when it comes to a lot of this kind of education. And we really want to elevate the playing field for everybody. And also just get the message across that it's not just your P5 schools that have the opportunity to engage in NIL activities. Any student at any university can benefit from it, but it starts with education and it follows with them being their own biggest cheerleaders, right? It's, much like Lynne's talking about the entrepreneurial spirit. Anybody can do it, provided that the groundwork is there for them all. And that's really what we try to do is to just do it through an online gamified educational program.
And why I thought it would be nice to have both of you is because I don't think there's a one size fits all education for student athletes. And Lynne, I love what you guys are doing because you're utilizing something that already existed on campus in order to serve student athletes through NIL. And Steve, you guys have got the online resources. So I like that we're going to be able to look at different ways to provide all of this different education that student athletes need. Lynne, can you tell us a little bit about what it's looked like in terms of student athletes being able to take advantage of the Idea Bank?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the biggest benefits, in my opinion, to the Idea Bank is the one-on-one consulting that we offer students. So if you're a current student, no matter your major, student athletes, whoever you are, you can book an appointment here and we'll meet with you one-on-one to help you develop your business plan into an action plan. So what I did with NIL is I basically took that model and thought, how can I make this relevant to student athletes? Because like Steve said, it really is about leaning into your entrepreneurial spirit. It just looks a little bit different than starting your traditional business and getting your business license and all of that. So we basically launched an NIL track of the consulting program that we already had in place. And it focuses a little bit more on their personal brand, and it focuses a little bit more on things like special events and special appearances and what that looks like for them. But they can book an appointment here and come and get advice from people who are in the small business development world, have the connections to things like, accountants who can give good tax advice, or even just people with the city who can help them navigate city relations or any kind of restrictions they might have on things they want to do locally. And then really just getting them plugged into the community. We do a lot of events and workshops with the Chamber of Commerce and with the city and with local economic development organizations. So the other side of that, beyond just advising the students, is raising awareness in our community about how businesses can work with student athletes and how that can benefit them. So it really was just about taking what we already do, what our mission already is, and tweaking it a little bit to make it more relevant to the world of college athletics and name, image, and likeness.
What I really like about what you do is it sounds like to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you're really able to tap into other resources in the community, both on the education side, but also in terms of actual NIL deals. How has your campus, your town and your campus community responded to NIL in terms of being available to assist student athletes or to educate them on some of these things?
They've responded. Our town has definitely responded well. So one of the benefits I think to being in a smaller market like Troy is that it's very tight-knit community. Everybody wants to help everybody wants to support everybody, and so people are really bought into Troy athletics if you live in Troy. And so you have a group of people that's really plugged in and knows about NIL and is just ready to go with it, and then you have a group of people that's like, I don't really know how this works or what I do or how do I even talk to a student athlete, but I want to be supportive. And that's where we can help and kind of guide them through, okay, this is what you should do to kind of get in touch with a student athlete, and here, let us sort of guide you through that process. But people really, for the most part, I haven't heard anything negative. For the most part, everybody wants to support the student athletes. It's just a matter of figuring out what that looks like.
Mm-hmm. Steve, I have a different kind of question for you because there have been quite a few platforms since NIL started that have offered online-based education for student athletes. And I'm curious how student athletes are responding to that in terms of, making the time for it and taking advantage of it. And how do you create online programming that does engage them and makes them excited to learn about things like financial literacy that they're probably not all that excited to learn about?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, right? I mean, one of the hardest things is capturing the attention of 18 to 22-year-olds, right? And I, as a parent of a 15-year-old, I know they have the attention span of a gnat. It makes a goldfish look engaged. So it's really all about how to capture their attention. And because our program's broken down to financial literacy, mental health well-being, and social media savvy and brand building, it's 3 pillars that are so important, particularly the mental health side, because it's still very stigmatized in the athletic community. And the idea of mental toughness, right? We saw it last year with Simone Biles stepping away from gymnastics and people calling her out for it and not recognizing that, if she doesn't have the proper headspace for it, she could seriously get killed. Like, it's not even about being injured. And so we really want to focus on creating a community around these athletes where they feel safe to be able to engage with other athletes talking about similar issues, whether it's a season-ending injury or career-ending injury. So everything's about fostering conversations. What we're doing that's unique is it's our platform set up like a bunch of individual TED Talks. The modules are about 8 minutes long because, again, we're looking at attention spans there. And it's interspersed with a lot of graphics and things to keep it interesting rather than just a simple one-on-one kind of lecture. And in the end, it's gamified. So you finish, you take a short quiz. When you answer the quiz, rewards pops up from corporate sponsors. So a kid is compelled to go through. Any student at any university can complete the program and easily walk away with well in excess of $1,000 worth of stuff, whether it's air miles from Delta Airline, whether it's a gift card to Dunkin' Donuts or Chick-fil-A, whether it's shirts from Untuck It. We work with a ton of corporate sponsors. And what it really helps to kind of push things forward. And we're able to do things where we're creating challenges between schools, between conferences. We're working with our corporate partners to do things like these higher level challenges, like a March Madness thing, where every time a school completes a certain thing, the rewards get significantly bigger. And it works out. So it's whether you're the third string goalie at Colgate, I'll pick on my own alma mater, or you're the quarterback from Alabama. It's an equal playing field all the way across, and all the information is relevant, and it's focused on not just the 4 years in college, but the 40 years after. A huge emphasis is on career transition and understanding that for 99.5% of these kids, they're not going to be playing a professional sport, but they've built up so many skill sets along the way that it's about capturing the attention of the corporate recruiter, not just a corporate sponsor. So we're trying to prepare them. And given that all the content is taught by professional athletes, entrepreneurs, business school professors, theoretically, it's a little bit more engaging than having me up there as the talking head. No one wants to hear me.
Well, we want to hear from you, Steve. Lynne, I'm curious to hear from you. How have you gotten student athletes to actually come to the Idea Bank? Because one of the things I've heard while I've been on campuses is, hey, we've created all these opportunities for student athletes and they're not showing up for stuff. They're not signing into the apps. What have you done to get the word out about it and then actually get them to come and set up those meetings with you?
That's a great question because it's the biggest challenge for sure. Especially, we already have that challenge with the regular student population because we're off campus. So it's a little harder to just stumble upon us. But that's also a bit of a selling point because we're not a classroom. We're in the downtown square, kind of near the local coffee shops, just a cool place to hang out. But we basically have engaged the coaches, and that has been really helpful for me because the coaches get bought in and then they can push their student athletes. When they get questions, they can kind of defer. It helps them because they can defer to me, and then it gives them a real solution to finding help for them. I will say it's been kind of an easy sell to get student athletes to come and just we give you free consultation, we'll help you make a plan. But the real challenge is the accountability after that, because at the end of the day, you can't just come to the Idea Bank, have a consultation meeting, and boom, you're being flooded with NIL deals. You do have to make some decisions and put some work into it yourself. So this is something we've been working on, where maybe we have a little bit more of an accountability program where we're checking in with them more often. because I can get them here for one meeting. That's pretty easy, but getting them to come for multiple meetings and stay on top of it, especially in the middle of the school year, that can be a challenge. But what we just finished today, actually, we have put a lot of our resources into a Canvas module or Canvas course for student athletes that will be on every single student athlete's account. And it's basically a student athlete NIL program, and they can get a lot of the resources that we use. We recorded some videos and sort of made like a very mini course for them to just be able to access at any time if they're looking for more information. It's not for any kind of class credit or anything like that, but if they're on a bus and they have a question or they're working on something, they can access this Canvas course. And then that gives us a way to share these resources with them and even engage with them a little bit further, because they'll get prompts from us. So, that is launching next week. So I haven't seen how, I don't have a participation rate for you for that, but hopefully next semester I'll be able to say, yes, everybody has taken advantage of this online tool and it's going great.
Yeah, I love that, because I teach NIL at UF in 2 different departments, and we use Canvas. So I feel like that's something that a lot of folks out there have access to on their campus to be able to use to deliver things like that. So I really like that idea a lot. Steve, I'm curious from you, when you all partner with, say an athletic department, how do you get student athletes to come and use your app and engage with your content?
Well, one of the great things is, we take kind of a multi-pronged approach. Through some of our strategic partners, we're able to offer basically a turnkey solution between the education, compliance, and the brand building, the brand integration. So it really helps to kind of streamline it and offer everything all at once in a very concise and easy deliverable package, right? The good thing is, for the athletic directors, they're given a tool so they can monitor where the kids are in terms of, what modules they've completed, how far along they are. I mean, at this point, the majority of the states mandate a minimum amount of hours of financial literacy education. We've worked with several state governments to help craft their NIL legislation bills. We're working with a few more right now as we speak. We always try to manage to squeeze in the importance of financial literacy, mental health awareness, and career transition skills as part of it. The state of New York mandates that any D1 athlete must undergo several hours of financial literacy in order to even participate in D1 sports. So our job is offering something that's easy, right? That they can pick up their phone, bang out a couple of modules, do it in their free time, because these kids are so overscheduled as it is, right? And we're asking so much of them. So if it's something where they're on a travel bus on the way to an event, they can do it right there and kill some of the time and meet their requirements. It doesn't have to be something that's like, oh my God, now I've got to do this, right? Because that takes away from it. And providing that the content is engaging enough. I mean, we've got one of the kids who is in the first batch of WWE new talents as part of their next in line NIL program. And he couldn't be any more engaging and wound up. So that's what we're trying to add to keep it engaging like that for the kids.
Steve, I didn't ask you to pull stats on this in advance, so I'm asking more for a ballpark, but what content has been most popular for student athletes? What are they looking for the most?
What really resonates with the athletes, which is really interesting, is the kids resonate with kids who are closest to their age, which makes sense in the grand scheme of things, right? It's one thing having, we have athletes on there who've played in the Super Bowl, and they're like, oh, that's okay. I want to know about Tank Ledger here, who just graduated, is now in the WWE. I want to follow that path. That makes sense. So it's really the content that hits home the most. One of the modules that really is important is, some of the stuff on the social diversity initiatives, where understanding how to engage social media. If, for the sake of argument, it's the eve of the draft and you're going to announce that you're gay. and understanding like, hey, a lot of folks are going to be really excited about that. A lot of folks may not be. How do you handle that? When do you learn to sort of walk away and just kind of close your phone, close your mind, whatever it is? It's important that these kids see that people have similar experiences, right? It's not going to resonate with any kid if I say, hey, when you make money, give it to XYZ Bank, because that'll work. It's another thing when it's someone who they grew up watching or maybe even played with at some point, and be able to say, okay, I like what this person's saying or doing. It makes sense. I understand it. I can, it jibes with me. So that's what really seems to make sense.
So I'm curious to hear from both of you what your experience has been like with student athletes when it comes specifically to personal branding, because I find it's what they want to talk about the most in the NIL classes that I teach, mostly because they don't totally understand what it means to have a personal brand and what their personal brand is. And they're sort of trying to figure that out as they put together their NIL plan. So I'll start with you, Lynne. What kind of things are they asking and what are you working through with them when it comes specifically to personal branding?
That's a great question. A lot of them really don't know what that means. A lot of them think, well, I'm a student athlete. That must be my personal brand. And so I kind of have to pull things out of them that aren't related to their sport. I have a little worksheet guide that I use that has some questions like, what are your interests and what are your strengths, and try to see if anything comes out that's not just that's beyond their sport, so that we can work on a 1 to 2 liner. Like, the goal when I work with student athletes is to have them come up with 1 to 2 sentences that describes their value proposition or who they are, what they would put in their bio, and why that might attract certain businesses. So most of them really have to think about it and do some soul searching, I guess, to figure out what is it that sets them apart. I think as far as questions that they ask, the biggest thing really is just they come in and they want to skip that part, right? They want to, like, what do I say to a business to try to get an NIL deal? Or how do I get a brand to send me free stuff? I get that question a lot. And so it's a process of kind of having them take a step back and realize we need to figure out exactly what you want to do and what sets you apart. And then we can work on your pitch from there.
What about you, Steve? What are you all doing in your personal branding modules? What do you focus on the most?
Well, I love what Lynne is saying, because it happens so often, because the kids will show up and be like, where's my free stuff? And how do I get it? And like, it's a little bit more complicated than that, right? So, it starts for us with working with, we have several mentors in this area, a couple who work with a lot of professional teams and helping those athletes building their brands. But it all stems from the beginning point of learning to build the brand of you. And it all stems with authenticity, right? Amy Trask, the former CEO of the Oakland Raiders, the first female executive, is one of our mentors. And her whole module is on being authentic. The same person you are on the field and off the field, that's what the brands want to see, right? That's what resonates. What we've found is the female athletes are just light years ahead of the male athletes when it comes to this, right? Sure. And it's because they're more vulnerable, they're more empathetic, they're more relatable. They're the first ones to post the videos of them waking up at 4 a.m. before getting on a bus for something like that. It's not all highlight reels, right? It's the stuff that your fans really want and want to engage with. And most important, it's the material that corporate sponsors are looking at saying, right, we can get behind this person. This is relatable, right? Because they know it's not about ego. It's authentic. So when you see the quarterback doing a pitch for his favorite mortgage broker and he lives in a dorm, you go, you know what? That's not authentic. It's a cash grab. And God bless it. If I had that opportunity as a college kid, I'd probably do the same thing. It's another thing when you could do a video of the team waking up at 4 a.m. and then it's sponsored by a mattress company showing them how well they sleep at night, right? Yeah. So that's what we try to convey that to these kids is it's not just about you being this amazing softball player or this amazing rower. What else are you? outside of this, because those are the interests that are going to tie into the brands that you probably want to work with and understand the product that you're trying to work with, right? Because there's nothing that's going to be better than something that's authentic. And so we really focus on that. And then somehow the light goes off for these kids and they go, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. And, and then it's much easier from there.
Now that we've talked a little bit about like the education itself, I know a lot of what I've heard from schools and why I wanted to do this panel, and we have another kind of complimentary panel that'll be in person in Orlando, is like if you're having to bootstrap this together and athletics isn't planning to spend a ton of money or doesn't have a ton of money to spend on education around NIL, like how do you find and take advantage of campus resources and just in general, use the people and the stuff that you've already got on campus? And Lynne, obviously the Idea Bank, it's so lucky for Troy that that was already in place and that you were able to tap into that so quickly. But is there anything else you've been involved with there at Troy in terms of utilizing other people or resources on campus, or advice you have for schools that are trying to figure out how to tap into that stuff outside of athletics? Because you are not housed in athletics, you are not part of the athletic department, and so for the athletic folks, how can they find the people like you on campus and pull this stuff together?
Yes, that's a great question, and my answer is going to seem kind of obvious, but I will elaborate a little bit. But I mean, at a university, you have so much knowledge in your faculty that are already teaching business courses, marketing courses, branding courses, law, accounting, anything like that. Just tapping into the faculty who are already teaching these concepts and getting their research, getting their knowledge, and getting them kind of bought into this idea of supporting student athletes through these concepts. Now, I will say, I am not part of the athletics department, but I have worked in college athletics and my husband works in college athletics. So I kind of already had a vested interest. So that was, I guess, an advantage. That was probably one of the reasons this got pushed a little bit more. And so others may not have a person in their school of business that might be ready to take it on, but you probably have a sport management program or a hospitality program, something like that. Maybe getting with that department chair if you have some ideas for educational needs. And it doesn't have to be anything. We're launching a 3-credit course in the fall, but even just this online, not for credit Canvas module it took a few months to put together just because I was doing all of the research kind of on my own. But if you've got a few faculty members that have areas of expertise that would play into it, you could probably get them to contribute some resources and put together something pretty simple to at least have a resource or, an online hub of resources or something like that.
And Steve, I know we want everybody to sign up and use your platform for education, of course, but is there anything that you've seen in terms of bootstrapping or tapping into other resources on campus that you think is worth mentioning?
Absolutely. I mean, first and foremost, one of the things that always gets the athletic department's attention on our end is we're free. We don't charge the universities. We think this level of education is much too important to take advantage of the students or the universities. I mean, if we look at it, once you get outside your core Power 5 schools, right, the majority of schools don't have the resources to commit to, well, now we need to hire an in-house NIL team, and now we have to hire, and then you have all these kind of programs coming after them with 5- and 6-digit figure spends, and that money gets lost. I'd much rather see a school have that ability to pay that same salary to a mental health professional in the university, and have them dedicated to the athletes, So we're more focused on the corporate partnership side to offset our areas, if you will. And that way we can go to the schools and say, listen, we're a resource and we're an advocate for you and your students. We're here to educate your coaches. We're here to educate the ADs. And most important, we're here to be advocates and educate the students. And whenever possible, we'll come to the schools, we'll talk to them. I try to fit all my travels around places that have the best barbecue because that's my own issue. But, we really work. We find that it resonates so well in so many schools like Troy, like Furman, like Colgate, where they may say, listen, we love NIL, but maybe we have one student or two students a year that go pro. It doesn't really affect us. And the reality is all these schools have kids who are engaged and real entrepreneurs at heart. And that's what it really is. NIL is an opportunity. It's not a guarantee at getting money. It's an opportunity to create a brand and monetize it. And again, we will beat it home all day long. You're auditioning, if you will, for corporate recruiters, right? If I'm a corporate recruiter and we work with a ton of them who'll reach out and say, run us a screen on D1 and D2 and D3 athletes who are accounting majors, because 99.9% of them are not going pro, but we want to see who's participating in a sport, who's doing well in their school, who's maintaining a really strong online presence in social media. Maybe they've got their own side hustle and they've got their own LLC and they're paying taxes. Hopefully, that's a big issue. But if they're able to do all these things, they're looking and saying, these are the people we want to hire, right? So our job is really prepping it. So it's not just working with athletic departments. It's also working with career services. We're trying to be complementary wherever it fits and trying to fill several niches in about as a cost-effective manner as you can get.
Yeah, and the way that your model works, Steve, where you're relying somewhat on brands, I've seen several schools who are doing a really nice job of tapping into the corporate sponsors that athletics and even the university already has, and using those folks as experts who can come in and talk to student athletes and can provide that kind of assistance. And it's one of those like no-brainer kind of things, but everybody's busy and they have too much on their plate. And so I think some people just haven't gotten there yet, but I think that's
sometimes you need to give that nudge. And it's one of the most important things we talk about is networking. When you're a college athlete, that's one of the greatest times to build your network, right? Because you're in the spotlight and you have that ability and you have this camaraderie with other athletes in the same sports or whatever it may be. But like you said, you have some schools, when you have your local and regional businesses that live and die with that local university's athletic teams, they're the first people you can reach out to and say, hey, how can we work together, right? Because those businesses are looking for some sort of ROI. They all want to be a part of this, but they also want to know there's something in it for them beyond just supporting the university. And it's just a matter of making those connections, and whether it's teaching the athletes how to do it, whether it's giving them the tools to be able to do it, or whether it's working with those corporate brands outright saying, hey, here's how we can do this. The opportunities are there. It just comes down to education.
Well, and you bring up a great point. I mean, a big reason, I won't say it's the whole reason or the only reason, a big reason some of these collectives exist is it's just super passionate fans and alumni and local businesses who just wanted to be involved in NIL and wanted to help student athletes. And as much as collectives make the headlines for the wrong reasons, and for those of you who are going to be in Orlando, we're going to do a collective panel that I think is going to be fantastic. But
fitting in Florida.
A lot of the collectives that I have consulted with, they have been trying to figure out mentorship programs where they can match alumni with student athletes. They're having these networking events for student athletes to be able to meet the members of the collective and alumni. They're setting up micro internships that fit student athlete schedules. Like that kind of stuff, unfortunately, doesn't make the news. I try to write about it, but frankly, like when you're writing for a big media publication, those aren't the kind of stories they want from us. And so they're not getting out there. So I just want to be here to tell everybody, like, those stories exist, and it's because alumni especially, but other fans and local businesses too, like they want to help. And so you shouldn't feel bad reaching out to them or sort of putting the word out, because I think you would get an incredible response that you're not expecting, that would allow you to tap into resources that aren't going to cost you anything. So that's my
Kristi, I love that approach, and I will absolutely reinforce that. And again, I'll use my own alma mater because Colgate is about as nepotistic as it gets. It's notorious for the alums helping undergrads, whether it's with jobs, internships, you name it. And we see this with the collectives, right? We see the good collectives, for the lack of a better word, are the ones who are pushing charitable endeavors, internships. There are so many things. NIL is more than just the idea of, hey, I want to get paid, right? It's opportunities, it's charity. One of the biggest things we talk about on our platform is that as an athlete, you have a platform, right? You have an obligation to sort of pay it forward. And whether it's through charitable endeavors, whether it's through creating a foundation, whether it's just following something that's passionate, right? You have that ability to build that out. And the collectives have a tremendous opportunity to back that up and reinforce it.
Absolutely. Lynne, you mentioned earlier through the Idea Bank working with the Chamber of Commerce, and I've seen several athletic departments and collectives bring chambers of commerce into events and conversations and really tap into that networking. And it might be with just your general student population, not just your student athletes, but what has your relationship looked like with your chamber? And are there any examples you can give people of ways to sort of tap into your chamber?
We have a really good relationship with the chamber, which is mutually beneficial to both us and the chamber. But I partner with them on a lot of workshops and lunch and learns kind of in general already for their members. And what we try to do is get my students and their members in the same room, learning about some of the same concepts. So, for example, we recently did a lunch and learn event on social media strategies for your business. It was a pretty basic topic. You know, if you own a business and you're trying to enhance your social media presence, come and learn. And so I also tried to recruit specific students to come to that. You know, I think this will be great for you to learn about kind of some of the things going on social media, so that we have some business owners and some students in the same room, really with a like-minded attitude towards, you know, growing their business. So I think that has been really good from a networking perspective. And then just honestly staying in touch with the president of the Chamber of Commerce and keeping her updated on the things that we're doing for student athletes in name, image, and likeness, so she could kind of act as an advocate on our behalf to telling her members and her business owners, like, hey, you know, if you're interested in working with a student athlete, this is what you do. And it just helps us spread the word within the community.
I love that. I think this has been such a great conversation. I wish we could go on and on, but I know also our adult attention spans aren't going to take us too much longer. But if you enjoyed this conversation and you're going to be in Orlando, I can tell you, I knew that the panel that is going to sort of follow this and continue this discussion, I knew exactly who I wanted on that panel from day one. And thankfully, they both said yes. So we've got Mary Beth Kuzmeski, who is a marketing professor at Oklahoma State. She created something called the Brand Squad, kind of like Lynne, like you all are tapping into the Idea Bank. They are tapping into their marketing department, and they're using students in the marketing department to help student athletes develop their personal brands and reach out to local businesses. And it's getting the marketing students incredible experience for their resumes and their portfolio. So not only are student athletes benefiting, but your regular student population is benefiting as well. So I'm excited for her to come talk about the Brand Squad. And then we have Mike Walsh from Boise State, who is going to talk about their new NIL certificate program, which I'm so jealous of because I have been trying to get something like that together at University of Florida, and we're not there yet. So I can't wait to hear how Mike did it. So for those who are going to be in Orlando, please join us for the NIL track. I think all the panels are going to be fantastic, but that's one I'm particularly excited about. Steve, Lynne, thank you for giving us some of your time and telling us more about what you're both working on. Really appreciate you sharing so much.
This is great. Looking forward to seeing you all down in Orlando.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.